Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and welcome to This Week in Mythics Plus. This week's affixes are Fortified, Bolstering, Storming, and of course Thundering. So Fortified, the trash is going to be harder. Bolstering received a couple of changes, so if you're a returning player and you haven't played, you stopped during Shadowlands or something, Bolstering is actually quite a bit different than it used to be. The way it works is when an enemy dies, nearby enemies get empowered, they get extra health and damage, but there's now a lot of restrictions and player-friendly quality of life changes to this affix that introduces quite a bit of counterplay to it relative to previous expansions. So, first of all, Bolstering has a duration now. You can wait it out, and it will eventually fall off of mobs entirely, so you don't have to worry about making 10 stacks of Bolstering on a Lieutenant and then it being unkillable. You just have to kite it for an extra 15 seconds or so, and then that will go away. Second of all, bosses do not get Bolstering on them. So if you pull trash onto bosses, that used to be banned under Bolstering because the bosses would get bolstered and then they kill you. Now it's actually a pretty good strategy against the Bolstering affix to save some time. You know, you kind of need to pull the rest of the dungeon a little bit more slowly, a little bit more methodically to beat the affix, but in Dragonflight, you actually can safely pull trash into bosses in some cases. In some cases, you can't do that, such as Temple of the Jade Serpent. You know, this is the hardest trash pack in the dungeon. You can't really pull it into Shaved Out. You, in fact, may want to Bloodlust this trash pack on Fortified rather than the boss if you need to. It's a very, very nasty pack. But in some dungeons, you maybe can get away with this a little bit. In dungeons like Halls of Valor, potentially, you know, some people like to do a big pull at the start of the dungeon, but what you could also do is take pull 2 into the boss here, and, you know, it's potentially something that you can get away with, and that sort of thing can help you create the space in the timer to then pull a little bit more carefully around Bolstering later in the dungeon. The big kind of general counterplay against Bolstering, though, is to make sure you're assigning your damage proportional to the mob's health, right? So if there's a mob with twice as much health as the rest of the pack, you want to be trying to, as a group, do twice as much damage to that mob as the rest of the pack so that it doesn't die last and get a lot of Bolstering stacks. The other thing to note is there are a lot of enemies that do not trigger Bolstering. The general rule of thumb for this is that any enemy that didn't drop Sanguine last week isn't going to bolster this week when it dies. So that's little enemies like the Infused Whelps in Ruby Life Pools and like the Scorchlings in Ruby Life Pools. Neither of those will trigger the Bolstering affix, which is really nice. The other affix we got going on here is Storming, so swirly tornadoes. Storming and Thundering, very thematic, flavorful affix combo that we've got going on here. Also pretty annoying together whenever Thundering procs and there's tornadoes and swirlies and stuff, and could be actually quite a pain to dodge on a lot of pulls. But not the end of the world affix that, I don't know, Storming, it can be pretty annoying. One of the biggest tips I have for this one is the Storming goes away as soon as it touches one person and knocks them. So if you are a tank in particular, if you're a tank on a pull that is safe, you know, if you're not in danger of dying, proactively soak tornadoes so that the rest of your group doesn't have to deal with them. Just get them out of there, and you know you'll be in good shape. Especially if you're like a DK, anytime your Death's Advance is up, just pop Death's Advance and run through all the tornadoes you can see. That sort of thing can be really powerful. Now this week we've also seen some big nerfs to several dungeons. The biggest set of dungeon nerfs landed on Halls of Valor, where basically every boss encounter got health taken off of it. The Skovald RP got reduced. The Kings got their health reduced at the end of this. And Fenrir also got mechanically kind of destroyed in the same way Morose did in Season 4, where the bleed now no longer kind of stacks infinitely and instead goes away before actually the next ones get applied. So some pretty big nerfs to this dungeon. A couple of other dungeons as well saw some slight nerfs too. So should be a good week to go get in there, get some Fortified score. It's not the best Fortified week on the calendar for pushing score. It's also the first time we're dealing with Bolstering in some of these dungeons, so we're gonna have to kind of learn a little bit about what sort of pulls do and don't make sense with Bolstering. But because Bolstering has been substantially nerfed from its older versions, the fact that it does eventually fall off, it does mean that there's not too much like mandatory pulls that are going to kill you. You know, there's a couple of pulls that it's going to be annoying on, right? Like this pull here, Storm Warriors into High Channeler. The Storm Warriors almost always die first because they have a third as much health as the High Channeler. That makes the next High Channeler's Lightning Storm very dangerous, but only one of her Lightning Storms is going to be affected by Bolstering, right? So you can probably get through that with a lot of defensives, or you can purposefully focus all your single target into her and try and do 3 times as much damage to her as to the Storm Warriors, and that's potentially something that will work as well. Other dungeon stuff, I mean, the same general dungeons are good and bad as always. Court of Stars and Shadow and Burial Grounds tend to be the easiest options for getting your keys done, and this week is no exception. They don't really have any nasty bolstering stuff in there. Just make sure that you are not pulling a void spawn with these packs. There's this void spawn that kind of ports around between these packs. Never engage one of these side packs when there is a void spawn in it. So if you're slow in killing this first pack or super fast, there will be a void spawn over here. Then just go to this side instead that won't have a void spawn. Yeah, besides that, I think that's all I have for you this week. I hope your keys go well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.